"Don't touch the car." I said it quietly, but Cynthia Wallace froze with one hand still pressed against my windshield wiper. It was 7:12 on a Tuesday morning, and I had stepped outside because of a sharp snap against the glass. Cynthia stood beside my 1968 Ford Mustang Fastback, trying to wedge a white HOA notice beneath the driver's side wiper. Morning sunlight caught every imperfection she hated: the faded Highland Green paint, unfinished chrome around one window, a small primer gray section near the rear quarter panel. My name is Daniel Brooks. I was 44, an automotive restoration technician, and that Mustang had been in my family longer than Cynthia had lived in Maple Ridge. She pulled her hand away. "Then remove it from the neighborhood. Good morning to you too." She didn't smile. Her phone was already in her other hand. "That vehicle has become an eyesore." I walked down the driveway, coffee still in my hand. The Mustang sat completely on my property, tires properly inflated, license plate mounted, windows closed. Behind the windshield, a small blue service tag hung from the rearview mirror. Cynthia pointed toward the car as if presenting evidence to a jury. "Look at it, Daniel. It makes the whole street look neglected. You put a violation notice on it because you don't like the paint? Because it appears abandoned." That word stopped me. Appears abandoned? Inoperable? Abandoned? Whatever terminology you prefer. Those aren't the same thing as old. Her expression hardened. For HOA purposes, appearance matters. I pulled the notice from beneath the wiper and unfolded it. At the top was the Maple Ridge logo. Below it, in bold letters, inoperable/abandoned vehicle. I read the line twice. Then I looked at the Mustang. Less than 12 hours earlier, I had driven it back into that exact spot after testing a replacement brake light switch. The engine had been warm enough to tick under the hood when I went inside. "Who determined it was inoperable?" I asked. "I documented its condition." "Did you try starting it?" "I don't need to touch your vehicle to see its condition." "Exactly." She frowned. "What is that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Yet." I folded the notice and slipped it into my jacket pocket. I wasn't going to make the mistake of assuming the HOA had no applicable rule. I worked around inspection requirements, repair documentation, serial numbers, and paperwork every day. Sometimes the annoying rule really was the rule. If the Mustang violated one, I wanted to read it before I started defending myself. Cynthia lifted her phone. Click. She photographed the faded quarter panel. Click. The unfinished trim. Click. The windshield. Her camera paused on the little blue tag hanging behind the glass. "Even that makes it look like some unfinished project car," she said. I followed her eyes. Blue cardstock. Black printing. A date stamped near the bottom. I almost smiled, but didn't. "Send me the exact provision you're relying on. You'll receive it." "Good." She stepped backward toward the sidewalk. "And Daniel? That car needs to go." I rested my hand on the Mustang's roof. The metal was cold beneath my palm. "We'll see what the rule actually says." Cynthia walked away convinced she had photographed everything wrong with my car. I watched her disappear across the street, then looked through the windshield at that blue tag swaying gently beneath the mirror. What Cynthia didn't know was that the tag she thought made my Mustang look abandoned had been placed there less than 48 hours earlier by the shop that had just inspected and serviced it. My father used to say an old car tells you exactly how it has been treated if you know where to look. He taught me that before I was old enough to drive, usually while I stood beside him holding a flashlight incorrectly. His name was Robert Brooks, and 21 years earlier, he and I had found the Mustang beneath a dusty tarp in a detached garage outside Knoxville. The Highland Green paint was already faded. The chrome was tired. The engine needed work. Dad walked around it twice, opened the hood, and smiled. "Good bones," he said. "We bought it together." Then life did what life does. Jobs changed. Money got tight. Parts waited on shelves. Dad got sick before we ever finished the restoration. After he died, the Mustang became mine, along with his old restoration notebook and a scarred half-inch wrench he had somehow used for almost everything. I never wanted to erase every mark the years had left behind. I wanted it safe, mechanically sound, and honest. That was why Cynthia's word bothered me more than eyesore. Abandoned meant forgotten. That Mustang had never been forgotten. Sunday afternoon, less than 48 hours before Cynthia touched my windshield, I had driven it to Harrison Auto Service for a scheduled inspection and service check. The mechanic tested the brakes, steering, lights, charging system, and basic roadworthiness items we had agreed to inspect. When I picked it up, the The blue service tag was hanging from the rearview mirror. I almost removed it before driving home. Instead, I left it there because I wanted to transfer the service date into Dad's restoration notebook. Monday evening, I replaced a stubborn brake light switch in my own garage, then drove several miles to confirm everything behaved normally. At 7:48 p.m., my driveway camera recorded the Mustang rolling back into Maple Ridge under its own power. Headlights on. Engine running. Me behind the wheel. At 7:51, I photographed the odometer for the notebook. Habit. Nothing more. Tuesday morning, after Cynthia left, I carried my coffee into the garage and opened that notebook on the workbench. Dad's handwriting filled the first pages. Mine took over years later. Dates. Mileage. Parts. Repairs. I added Sunday's service information and looked through the documents in the folder beneath it. Current registration. Insurance. Service invoice. Photographs. I wasn't building a case yet. I was checking myself. If Maple Ridge had a rule saying partially restored vehicles couldn't remain visible from the street, then faded paint might actually matter. If the rule required vehicles to be operable, that was a different question entirely. At 8:03, my phone buzzed. Cynthia had sent the provision. As requested, she wrote. Beneath it, the condition of your vehicle clearly qualifies. I enlarged the screenshot. The heading concerned inoperable and abandoned vehicles. I read the language once, then opened the complete HOA document rather than trusting a cropped image. 10 minutes later, I was still reading. I searched for restoration. Nothing. Faded paint. Nothing. Unfinished. Nothing. Then I walked back outside. The Mustang waited in the morning sun, imperfect as ever. I opened the driver door. The blue tag moved gently beneath the mirror. I slid Dad's old key into the ignition. Click. The gauges woke. Whir, rumble. The V8 settled into a steady idle, vibrating softly through the steering wheel. Across the street, Cynthia's blinds moved. I looked at the notice on the passenger seat. Inoperable/abandoned vehicle. Then I looked at the running engine in front of me. For the first time that morning, I knew exactly which question I needed Maple Ridge to answer. At 8:26, Cynthia came back across the street while the Mustang was still idling. I saw her in the side mirror before I heard her shoes on the driveway. The engine had settled into that low, uneven V8 rhythm old cars have when they're warm enough to sound alive, but not polished enough to sound modern. Rumble, rumble, rumble. I stepped out and left the driver door open. Cynthia stopped 6 feet from the front fender. What are you doing? Checking the car. I can see that. Her eyes moved from the running engine to the notice lying on the passenger seat. Starting it now doesn't change its condition. Which condition? Daniel. I'm serious. I reached through the open door and switched on the headlights. Both beams reflected against the garage wall. I pressed the brake pedal and watched the reflection from the rear lights in the window behind me. The notice says inoperable or abandoned. Cynthia crossed her arms. It looks abandoned. That's different. Not to everyone who has to look at it. There it was again. Not whether the Mustang operated. Not whether it had been abandoned. Whether Cynthia liked seeing it. I shut the engine off. The sudden silence felt sharper than the rumble. Did anyone from management inspect the vehicle before this notice was issued? I submitted photographs. Photographs of faded paint. Photographs of its condition. Those aren't automatically the same thing. She lifted her phone. You're trying to argue technicalities. I'm trying to understand the violation. Her expression tightened. The HOA doesn't need residents keeping junk vehicles where everyone can see them. Junk. I looked at the Mustang's clean tires, current plate, intact glass, and blue service tag behind the windshield. Is that the word in the rule? You know what I mean. I know what you're saying. I'm asking what the document says. Cynthia stepped closer to the windshield and photographed the blue tag again. Click. Project car, she said. That's exactly what this is. It's being restored. Same thing. Not if the violation says inoperable. She lowered her phone. Driving it once doesn't prove anything. That sentence stayed with me. I hadn't told her when I last drove it. I hadn't shown her Sunday's service invoice, Monday's driveway footage, or the odometer photograph. She had decided once, because once was the version that fit what she already believed. Okay, I said. Then I'll document movement too. Cynthia gave a short laugh. You're going to drive around just to prove a point? No. I need parts. At 9:04, I photographed the odometer. Then I placed Dad's old restoration notebook on the passenger seat and backed the Mustang out of the driveway. Cynthia stood on the sidewalk watching. I drove to my regular parts supplier, picked up weather stripping and 2 clips I'd ordered earlier that week, then took the longer route home so I could listen for a vibration near the rear trim. 14 miles total. At 9:46, I pulled back into Maple Ridge. Cynthia was outside watering a planter. Her head turned before I reached my driveway. I parked, shut off the engine, and photographed the odometer again. 14 miles more than 42 minutes earlier. Satisfied, she called. With the car? Mostly. Driving it around doesn't make it attractive. I looked up from my phone. That was the first time she said the quiet part without wrapping it in HOA terminology. I held up the violation notice. Good thing this doesn't say unattractive. Cynthia stopped watering. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I noticed her phone angled toward the Mustang again. Click. Another photograph. She thought she was collecting proof that the car looked bad. I was beginning to realize she was documenting something else entirely. A registered, serviced, actively driven vehicle she had already accused of being inoperable and abandoned. By 10:15, the Mustang was back in the same spot, but my understanding of the problem had moved 14 miles. I carried the parts bag into the garage, set Dad's restoration notebook on the workbench, and opened the complete Maple Ridge covenants on my laptop. This time, I wasn't searching for Cynthia's language. I was reading theirs. The vehicle section prohibited certain inoperable or abandoned vehicles from being kept where restricted by the community rules. I moved slowly through the surrounding provisions and definitions. Nothing I found said a vehicle became inoperable because its paint had faded. Nothing classified unfinished chrome as abandonment. Nothing turned restoration work into a violation by itself. That still didn't mean appearance standards were irrelevant everywhere in Maple Ridge. It meant the notice sitting beside my keyboard had accused my Mustang of something specific, and I needed to know whether the evidence supported that specific accusation. I wrote 3 words across a yellow legal pad: condition, movement, rule. Under condition, I listed current registration, insurance, recent service, functioning lights, brakes, and charging system. Under movement, I wrote Monday, 7:48 p.m., driveway camera, then Tuesday, 9:04 a.m. to 9:46 a.m., 14 miles. Under rule, I copied the violation exactly as issued: inoperable/abandoned vehicle. Then I pulled Sunday's service invoice from the folder. The paper still had a faint, oily fingerprint near the bottom where I'd handled it at the shop. Date, vehicle description, mileage, service items. I glanced through the garage window toward the Mustang. The little blue tag was still hanging behind the windshield. I walked outside, opened the driver door, and examined it more carefully. Harrison Auto Service. Service date. Reference number. Mileage. I had been looking at that tag for 2 days without realizing how useful it might become. Cynthia had photographed it because she thought it made the Mustang look like a project waiting to be finished. In reality, the date on it connected the car to a professional service visit less than 48 hours before her complaint. At 10:47, my email chimed. Maple Ridge Management had formally acknowledged Cynthia's report and requested that I correct the alleged condition or provide information disputing the violation. I didn't send an angry response. I attached the current registration, proof of insurance, Sunday's service documentation, and 2 odometer photographs showing the 14-mile change that morning. Then I wrote, "Please clarify what evidence was used to classify this vehicle as inoperable or abandoned under the cited provision." I hesitated before clicking send, then added 1 sentence. "The vehicle is actively operated and is undergoing restoration." Send. At 11:22, Cynthia appeared near my driveway again. She didn't step onto the property this time. "Management contacted you?" "They did." "Then you understand this is official." "I understand there's an official notice." "Same difference." "Not really." She stared at the Mustang. "You keep acting like paperwork changes what everyone can see." I leaned against the garage frame. "What exactly can everyone see, Cynthia?" She gestured toward the faded paint. "That. An old car. A neglected car. Those are different things. It ruins the appearance of the street." There it was again. Appearance. Not operability. Not abandonment. Appearance. I looked at the blue tag behind the windshield, then at the 14-mile odometer photographs on my phone. "Maybe you don't like how it looks," I said. "But that isn't the violation you issued." Cynthia's face tightened. "We'll see what the committee thinks." She walked away. I watched her cross the street. then turned back toward the Mustang. For the first time, I understood the shape of the fight. I didn't have to convince anyone that my car was beautiful. I only had to make them prove it was what they had already called it. The complaint packet arrived at 2:37 that afternoon. I opened it expecting another copy of the violation notice. Instead, Maple Ridge had included Cynthia's photographs, 12 of them. I clicked through slowly. Faded quarter panel, missing trim, primer near the rear wheel, close-up of the windshield, another angle showing the Mustang beside my garage. Cynthia had photographed every imperfection like she was building a museum exhibit called Reasons Daniel's Car Offends Me. Then I reached photograph 8. I stopped. The image had been taken that morning after I returned from the parts supplier. The driver door was still open. The headlights were on. I was standing beside the Mustang holding my phone after photographing the odometer. Behind the windshield, the blue service tag hung clearly enough that I could read the date when I enlarged the image. I leaned closer to the screen. Cynthia had accidentally captured 3 things at once: the car immediately after being driven, the recent service tag, and me standing beside the open driver door. Her caption read, "Vehicle remains visibly unfinished and negatively impacts neighborhood appearance." I read that sentence twice. Not inoperable, not abandoned, unfinished. Appearance. I printed the photograph. Then I printed Sunday's service invoice and placed them side by side on my workbench. Same vehicle. Same service date visible on the tag. Same mileage range. Next came my 2 odometer photographs from Tuesday morning. 14 miles between them. Then Monday night's driveway camera clip showing the Mustang returning home at 7:48 p.m. Condition. Movement. Rule. The 3 words on my legal pad suddenly felt less like preparation and more like a map. At 3:11, management replied to my earlier email. They confirmed the notice had been based primarily on photographs submitted by the compliance committee and offered me a review meeting Thursday evening. I accepted. 5 minutes later, Cynthia texted me. "I saw you submitted documents. None of that changes the visual condition of the vehicle." I looked through the garage window at the Mustang. She still didn't understand what she had just admitted. "I'm not disputing the visual condition," I wrote. Her response came almost immediately. "Then we agree." "No. We agree that it looks old." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared. Again. Old, unfinished, neglected. Call it whatever you want. I typed carefully. The notice calls it inoperable and abandoned. This time there was no answer. That evening, I went through Dad's restoration notebook from the beginning. His handwriting documented the first engine work. Mine documented later repairs. Brake cylinders. Fuel lines. Steering components. Electrical work. Every page told the same quiet story. The Mustang wasn't forgotten. It was being brought back piece by piece. Near the back, I clipped in Sunday's service record. Then I removed the blue tag from the mirror for the first time and held it beneath the garage light. Cheap cardstock. 2 punched holes. A piece of string. Nothing dramatic. Yet Cynthia had photographed it because she thought it supported her story. I placed it inside a clear sleeve beside the service invoice. Thursday's meeting wasn't going to be about whether the Mustang deserved a beauty award. I wasn't asking anyone to admire faded paint or understand why I had kept some of Dad's old patina instead of sanding every memory away. I was asking something much simpler. If Maple Ridge wanted to accuse my car of being inoperable or abandoned, they needed evidence that it was inoperable or abandoned. Cynthia had brought photographs. I had brought movement, records, dates, and now, thanks to her, a photograph that connected all 3. Thursday evening, I carried Dad's restoration notebook into the Maple Ridge clubhouse under my left arm. The blue service tag sat inside a clear sleeve near the back, between Sunday's invoice and Tuesday's odometer photographs. Cynthia was already there. She had arranged printed photographs across the conference table like evidence at a trial. "You brought the scrapbook?" she asked. "Maintenance records. Whatever you want to call it." I sat opposite her. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and somewhere behind the reception desk, an old wall clock clicked loudly enough to measure the silence. At 7:03, HOA President Mark Ellison opened the review. Cynthia spoke first. "The issue is appearance and neglect. This vehicle has deteriorated paint, unfinished bodywork, missing trim, and has been sitting visibly in a residential driveway." Mark glanced at the notice. "The violation issued is for an inoperable or abandoned vehicle." Cynthia nodded. Because that condition is obvious from the photographs. I opened my notebook. Can we display photograph 8? The property manager projected it onto the wall. There was the Mustang in morning sunlight. Faded paint. Primer patch. Driver door open. Headlights glowing. Me standing beside it. Blue tag behind the windshield. Cynthia gestured toward the image. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So am I. I stood. What time was this taken? The manager checked the file. 9:47 a.m. Tuesday. I placed 2 odometer photographs on the table. First image, 9:04 a.m. Second, 9:46 a.m. 14-mile difference. Mark examined them. You drove the vehicle that morning? Yes. To pick up restoration parts. Cynthia leaned forward. Driving it once doesn't change how it looks. I agree. That stopped her. I continued. I'm not asking the committee to decide whether the Mustang is attractive. I placed the current registration and insurance documents beside the odometer photographs. I'm asking whether the evidence supports the violation that was issued. Next came Sunday's service invoice. Then the blue tag. I removed it from the clear sleeve and laid it beside Cynthia's photograph. That tag is visible in her own picture. It came from Harrison Auto Service less than 48 hours before the complaint. Mark picked it up. Date. Reference number. Mileage. He compared it with the invoice. Recent service? Yes. Cynthia shook her head. It's still a project car. Absolutely. Then you admit it. I've never denied restoring it. I turned another page and showed Monday's driveway camera still, 7:48 p.m., Mustang returning under its own power, headlights on. Project doesn't automatically mean inoperable. Old doesn't automatically mean abandoned. Cynthia crossed her arms. Residents shouldn't have to look at something like that every day. The room went quiet. There it was again. Not mechanical condition. Not abandonment. Taste. Mark looked from Cynthia to the projected photograph. Do we have evidence the vehicle cannot operate? The manager searched the packet. The complaint contains photographs of its exterior condition. Anything showing it unable to move? No, Cynthia pointed at the primer section. Just look at it. I looked too. I saw faded paint, unfinished chrome, and 21 years of work my father and I never got to finish together. Then I looked at the blue tag on the table. I'm not asking anyone here to like my car, I said. I'm asking you to prove the violation you already accused it of. Nobody answered immediately. The clock behind us clicked once, twice, 3 times. Mark finally looked down at the notice. Then I think we need to separate appearance from operability. And for the first time since Cynthia touched my windshield wiper, the argument was finally about the rule instead of the paint. Mark Ellison turned the violation notice around so everyone at the table could read the same 2 words, inoperable/abandoned. Let's stay with what was actually issued, he said. Cynthia shifted in her chair. And I'm telling you the vehicle's condition justified it. Its appearance justified an inspection, Mark replied. That's not necessarily the same as proving this classification. I stayed quiet. I had learned years ago that when a document finally started asking the questions for you, talking too much could only get in its way. The property manager pulled up the full vehicle provision on the projector. Black text replaced Cynthia's photograph. Mark read through it slowly. Daniel, are you arguing the association has no authority over vehicles? No. Are you arguing restoration vehicles are automatically exempt? No, Cynthia frowned, almost as if she had been waiting for both answers. I continued. I'm arguing that this particular notice identifies my Mustang as inoperable or abandoned. The evidence doesn't establish either condition. I slid Monday's driveway camera still toward Mark. 7:48 p.m. Driven home. Then the first Tuesday odometer photograph. 9:04 a.m. Then the second. 9:46 a.m. 14 additional miles. Then Sunday's invoice and the blue service tag. Recent service. Mark looked toward the manager. Current registration? Confirmed. Insurance? Confirmed. Any evidence the vehicle has been left unmoved for an extended period? She shook her head. None in the complaint packet. Cynthia tapped one finger against the table. You're reducing this to paperwork when the entire point of an HOA is maintaining neighborhood standards. Then cite the standard, I said. She turned toward me. Excuse me. If faded paint violates a written appearance standard applicable to this vehicle, show me that standard. If unfinished chrome violates one, show me. If a primer patch violates one, show me. I pointed toward the notice. But those aren't the reasons listed here. Cynthia's cheeks tightened. Everyone can see that car is an eyesore. Maybe. The word surprised her. Maybe. You're allowed to hate how it looks. I leaned back. I'm not asking you to change your taste. Mark folded his hands. Daniel's point is that personal judgment about appearance cannot substitute for the evidence needed to support the violation we're reviewing. Cynthia looked toward the projected rule. So an owner can leave any ugly car in the driveway? That's not what I said, Mark replied. We evaluate whatever provision actually applies. I opened Dad's notebook to the page where I had clipped the service tag. This car has been maintained, serviced, registered, insured, and driven. It is also old. Those facts can exist at the same time. Cynthia stared at the photograph again. Headlights on. Driver door open. Blue tag visible. The image she had submitted to show neglect now sat beside a timestamp proving the Mustang had just returned from a 14-mile drive. Mark looked around the table. Does anyone have evidence supporting the claim that this vehicle was inoperable? Silence. The wall clock clicked. Once. Twice. Cynthia finally said, "It ruins the street." I looked at her, then at the notice. Then show me the rule about ugly. Nobody laughed. That made the moment stronger. Mark lowered his eyes to the paperwork. Cynthia didn't answer. She couldn't. Because after 2 days of photographs, messages, and accusations, we had finally stripped the dispute down to its simplest form. She had evidence that my Mustang looked old. I had evidence that it worked. And the violation on the table wasn't for being old. Mark didn't answer my question immediately. He looked down at the violation notice, then back at the vehicle provision projected across the wall. The fluorescent lights hummed above us. Cynthia's photographs remained spread across the table, 12 different angles of the same Mustang, 12 attempts to make faded paint look like proof of mechanical failure. Finally, Mark turned toward the property manager. Has the association identified any separate appearance provision that this vehicle is alleged to violate? She checked the file again. Not as part of this notice. And the violation before us is specifically inoperable or abandoned vehicle. Correct. Cynthia exhaled sharply. This is absurd. We're ignoring the whole reason these standards exist. Mark shook his head. No, we're applying the standard that was actually cited. He picked up my registration, then the service invoice. Current registration. Current insurance. Recent service documentation. He moved to the odometer photographs. 14 miles driven Tuesday morning. Then the driveway camera still. And movement the previous evening. Cynthia pointed toward her photograph on the screen. And look at the body. Look at the primer. Look at the missing trim. We have, Mark said. Those details establish that the vehicle is cosmetically unfinished. They do not, by themselves, establish that it is inoperable or abandoned. The sentence landed without drama. That made it heavier. Cynthia leaned back, lips pressed into a thin line. Mark asked whether anyone had additional evidence. Nobody did. One committee member moved to withdraw the violation. Another seconded. The vote passed. Just like that. The notice Cynthia had snapped beneath my windshield wiper 2 mornings earlier was no longer enforceable as issued. No applause. No victory speech. The property manager simply marked the case withdrawn and began typing notes. Cynthia gathered her photographs. So that's it, she asked. Mark answered before I could. For this violation, yes. And everyone just has to accept that thing sitting there. I closed Dad's restoration notebook. Cynthia, you keep asking people to decide whether they like my Mustang. She stared at me. Because appearance matters. Then enforce an applicable written appearance rule if there is one and the facts support it. I tapped the withdrawn notice. But don't call a running car inoperable because you don't like looking at it. Her eyes dropped to the blue service tag inside the notebook. You planned all this. No, I almost laughed. You photographed most of it for me. She looked toward photograph 8 still glowing on the wall. My open driver door. Headlights on. Blue tag visible. A car she wanted the committee to see as abandoned, captured minutes after a 14-mile drive. The property manager cleared her throat. The board may want to review vehicle guidance, so future notices distinguish appearance concerns from operability or abandonment classifications. Mark nodded. Agreed. Cynthia didn't respond. She slid her photographs into a folder and left. I stayed long enough to receive written confirmation that the warning had been withdrawn. Outside, the evening air smelled like wet pavement and cut grass. I unlocked the Mustang. Dad's old key turned beneath my fingers. Click. The gauges woke. Whir rumble. The V8 filled the quiet parking lot with that familiar uneven pulse. I placed the restoration notebook on the passenger seat and watched the blue tag tremble between its pages. Cynthia had wanted the car removed because she thought age, faded paint, and unfinished work meant neglect. The committee had finally separated what she saw from what she could prove. I wasn't asking Maple Ridge to call my Mustang beautiful. I never had. I was asking them to call it what the evidence showed it was. Mine, maintained, actively driven, and still becoming what my father and I had started building 21 years earlier. A month later, the Mustang still looked old. That mattered to me more than I expected. I had replaced the missing window trim, corrected the vibration I'd noticed during that 14-mile drive, and polished the chrome until Dad's old reflection might have recognized it. But I left the faded Highland Green paint alone. I even kept the small patch of patina near the rear quarter panel where Dad used to rest his hand whenever we stood beside the car arguing about what to repair next. Saturday morning, sunlight spilled through my open garage while I tightened the last fastener beneath the hood. Dad's scarred half-inch wrench felt familiar in my palm. Click. I closed the hood gently. On the workbench, his restoration notebook lay open beside the blue service tag that had started as one of Cynthia's favorite pieces of evidence. I slipped the tag into a clear sleeve and clipped it permanently behind Sunday's service invoice. Date, mileage, reference number. Just another record now. Another small chapter in a car that had accumulated 21 years of them. I carried the notebook inside, returned to the driveway, and opened the driver door. Across the street, Cynthia Wallace was walking toward her mailbox. She noticed me. Then she noticed the Mustang. For a moment, we were almost back at 7:12 on that Tuesday morning. Her phone raised. HOA notice under my windshield wiper, faded paint transformed into an accusation. But this time her hands stayed at her sides. I slid Dad's key into the ignition. Click. Whir, rumble. The V8 settled into its familiar rhythm. Cynthia looked over. I gave her a small nod. After a second, she nodded back. That was all. No apology. No argument. No photograph. I backed into the street and let the engine idle while the garage door closed behind me. The Mustang wasn't suddenly a show car. Anyone passing Maple Ridge could still see its age. The paint still carried decades of sunlight. Some chrome still needed work. And that was exactly why the ending mattered. I hadn't defeated Cynthia by making the car prettier. If I had rushed through a cosmetic restoration just to satisfy her, the story would have ended with her assumption controlling my choices. Instead, Maple Ridge had withdrawn the violation because appearance wasn't evidence of the condition they had accused the car of having. 2 weeks after the hearing, the HOA circulated updated enforcement guidance reminding compliance volunteers to document the specific condition supporting a vehicle violation before issuing a notice. It wasn't dramatic. Cynthia wasn't removed from the committee. Nobody was publicly humiliated. The system simply became a little harder to misuse. I turned onto Maple Ridge Boulevard and pressed the accelerator. Rumble. Houses slid past the side windows. At the neighborhood entrance, I caught the Mustang's reflection in the monument sign, faded green, imperfect, unmistakably old. I thought about Dad calling it good bones the first afternoon we saw it. He had never needed the car to look new before believing it was worth saving. Neither did I. Cynthia had looked at faded paint and decided she knew the whole story. But registration had a date. Service had a record. Movement had mileage. Her own photograph had a timestamp. Facts didn't care whether the chrome impressed anyone. I shifted gears and headed toward the open road. The Mustang still looked old. The accusation was what didn't survive.